Hello family, enjoy this relaxing moment with Folktales 38. Remember to subscribe and share your thoughts in the comment section and generously hit the like button because it means a lot to us. Please relax and enjoy as we dive in the story. A billionaire who pretends to be poor to taste his family part 2. David's sacrifice. The village sun was hot that day, merciless and bright. Edwin and David were clearing new ground to plant maize. Sweat drenched their shirts, and their palms were hard from days of labor. The rich scent of soil filled the air, and though the work was back-breaking, it gave them a kind of peace. But beneath that peace, a choice had begun to weigh heavily on David's heart. He had received a letter from the university. It was time to return for a new semester. But he had not told his father. The truth was simple: Edwin could no longer afford his school fees, not after selling everything and pretending to be broke. And David knew that asking would only put pressure on a man who already carried the weight of too much. That evening, after their bath with cold stream water, David sat outside under the mango tree and read the letter again. Then he quietly tore it and threw the pieces into the firewood stove. The next morning, he told Edwin, "I've decided to defer school this year." Edwin looked up from where he was boiling yam. "Why?" "I want to help you full-time on the farm. Maybe next year, we'll be in a better position." Edwin frowned. "But David, your education." "I can catch up later," David said quickly. "This family needs me now. I'm not going anywhere." Edwin stared at his son. In that moment, he didn't just see his boy, he saw a man. A man who chose loyalty over comfort. Sacrifice over ambition. Love over self. "Thank you, son," he whispered. Meanwhile, the distance between them and Linda had grown into a canyon. She no longer came home every night. When she did, she reeked of strong perfume and had a red glow on her lips, lipstick from a world far from the village. One day, she came home in a brand new wrapper, gold earrings dangling, and dropped a nylon bag of rice on the floor. "You people should eat," she said. "At least I'm doing something to survive." David stood up. "You call this survival? What kind of life are you living?" Linda turned to him, her face hard. "Don't speak to me like that, boy." Edwin intervened. "Let it go, David." "No, Daddy," David said, his voice calm but strong. "Someone needs to speak the truth. You're embarrassing this family." Linda chuckled bitterly. "So it's now two of you against me. It's all right. I'll save you the trouble." The next day, she packed her bag and left without a goodbye. Sandra, too, had drifted into a life of deception and recklessness. She would leave the house early and return late, always with money or new makeup, sometimes bruised and looking worn. Edwin tried one last time. "Sandra," he said gently, "come and sit." She sat, arms folded, clearly uninterested. "I know this life isn't easy," he said, "but there's a better way. Come back home. Stay. We'll figure it out together." Sandra scoffed. "Stay here and die of poverty. I'm not like you or David. I can't suffer just to look loyal." "You've changed," Edwin said. "No, Daddy," she said. "I just stopped pretending." She left that evening. Left without hugging anyone. Without even turning back. David and Edwin stood side by side as they watched her disappear into the dust of the road. "She'll regret it," David said. "Maybe," Edwin replied. "But regret always comes too late." 4 days after Sandra and Linda left, the house became quieter than ever. But in that quietness, a kind of strength was forming. Edwin and David worked harder, and the farm began to flourish. Villagers started noticing. "Aha, Edwin's cassava is growing well. Oh. David is a real village champion now." Some neighbors began offering to pay David to help with their farms. Others asked him to tutor their children. His hands were rough, but his name carried respect. One day, Chief Boma sent a message. "Tell that your son to come and work in my factory. I'll pay him well." Edwin gave David the message. David simply replied, "No, thank you. I'd rather sweat with you than shine with a stranger." Edwin smiled and patted his back. Weeks later, David stood on a small platform at the village youth meeting, giving a short speech on integrity. Wealth can vanish, he said, but your name remains. If you lose everything, but you still have honor, then you're not poor, you're rich in the way that matters. The crowd clapped. That night, Edwin cooked dinner, bitter leaf soup and pounded yam, and served it with pride. As they ate, he looked at David and said, "You've become more than my son. You're my partner now. My friend. My hope." David smiled. "You've always been my example." They sat outside under the stars, not speaking much. Just enjoying the quiet of a bond that had passed through fire and come out shining. And though their pockets were empty, their hearts were full. The revelation. It had been 7 months since the day Edwin Okoro told his family he had lost everything. 7 long months of sweat, silence, betrayal, and survival. But in that same time, the soil had softened beneath their feet, the trees had flowered, and the once dead compound had become alive with farm produce, laughter from neighbors' children, and something even deeper, truth. Edwin stood by the edge of the farm one morning, looking out at the rows of cassava, the thick leafy vegetables, the neatly spaced maize. The sun had barely risen, but he was already bathed in sweat. David was beside him, tightening his wrapper and placing baskets of harvested okra into the wheelbarrow. "You've done well, son," Edwin said. David wiped his brow. "We've done it together, Dad." Edwin looked at him for a long moment. Then he smiled. "I think it's time." "Time for what?" David asked, curious. Edwin didn't answer. He simply walked away, instructing David to meet him at the village square at noon. David nodded, confused but respectful. By midday, the sun was high and hot. Edwin stood beside a large black SUV parked under a mango tree. It was clean, polished, with Lagos plates. The villagers gathered slowly, murmuring. Children pointed at the car, women adjusted their wrappers, men leaned forward in curiosity. David arrived, covered in dust from farm errands. His shirt clung to his body. As he approached the car, his steps slowed. "Dad, what is this?" Edwin held out a set of car keys. "This," he said, "is yours." David looked from the keys to the car, then back to his father. I don't understand." "I never lost my wealth," Edwin said quietly. "It was all a test." The crowd gasped. Even the trees seemed to hold their breath. "What?" David whispered. "I hid the truth. I moved my money into secret accounts, pulled out of my businesses temporarily, and staged the bankruptcy. I needed to know, David. I needed to know who truly loved me, without the money. Without the power." David stepped back slightly, his mouth open in shock. "You've been suffering with me all this time," Edwin continued, his voice trembling, "but you didn't complain. You didn't run away. You worked, you stayed, and you loved me when I had nothing." Tears welled up in David's eyes. "I had to be sure," Edwin said, stepping forward. "And now I am. You are my legacy. Everything I own, every company, every property, every kobo, now belongs to you." The villagers broke into applause. Some clapped. Some shouted, "Praise God." Others simply wept. David covered his face and cried. Deep, raw, heavy sobs. He had thought they were poor. He had sacrificed school, labor, comfort, and now this. Edwin pulled him into a hug. "You are the kind of son any man would pray for." After the crowd had dispersed and they returned home in the SUV, David sat in the passenger seat, still dazed. "So, all this time, you knew what they were doing, Mom, Sandra, and you said nothing." "I wanted the truth to ripen fully," Edwin replied. "And it did." David wiped his eyes. "They are going to hear about this." "They already have," Edwin said. That same evening, a message reached Linda and Sandra through a neighbor's WhatsApp status. The headline: Edwin Okoro's fortune was never lost. Son David now heir to multimillion naira empire. Linda nearly dropped her wine glass in Chief Boma's parlor. Sandra saw it on Instagram and screamed, "What?" They both rushed back to the village, arriving dusty and breathless the next day. The gates to the family home were now painted fresh, the compound swept clean, and the black SUV sat gleaming in the corner. Linda knocked as if she was still the owner. Edwin came out slowly. "Edwin," she said, her voice trembling, "it was all a test." "Yes," he replied, calm and unmoved. "Please," she said, falling to her knees. "I was scared. I made mistakes. I didn't know. Forgive me." Sandra stepped forward. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I was foolish. I didn't mean to hurt you." David appeared behind his father. "You meant to protect yourself," he said coldly. "That's what you meant." "David, please," Sandra said. "You're my brother." "I begged you," David said. "I begged both of you to stay, to fight with us, and you chose money." "We were wrong," Linda cried. "We were blinded." Edwin looked at them both. "I forgive you," he said softly. "But forgiveness is not the same as restoration. You may enter this compound, but you no longer hold a place in this house." They stood there, frozen. "But Edwin," Linda said. "I gave everything I had to this family," he said, his voice rising slightly. "When the river dried up, you ran to find another. Now that the water flows again, you return to drink." Sandra's lips quivered. "Please," she whispered. David stepped forward. "We wish you peace. But we found ours." They left in silence. That night, Edwin and David sat outside once more, like so many nights before, but this time with peace in their bones. "You're not angry?" David asked. "No," Edwin said. "Because I found what I was searching for." "What's that?" "The true meaning of family." David smiled. "Now," Edwin said, placing the keys in David's hands, "it's time for you to lead." When the world found out, the news spread faster than fire in dry harmattan grass. Edwin Okoro was never broke. Heir named, the loyal son who stayed. Wife and daughter who abandoned him in shame. From Umi Okoro to Lagos, Abuja to Port Harcourt, the story made headlines on blogs, WhatsApp groups, and even news platforms. People reposted David's photos with captions like, "Real son. Real man. Loyalty is royalty. Blood isn't always love, this young man proved it." Edwin's phone buzzed non-stop. Old friends, business partners, pastors, even distant relatives who hadn't called in years all suddenly remembered his number. Or, "Chief Edwin. I always knew you would bounce back. You remember me from secondary school. Let's connect again. I've always admired your discipline, sir. Please, let's do business." Edwin ignored most of them. His focus was not on rebuilding relationships based on admiration, but on building a legacy with value. Meanwhile, David's face had become something of a national inspiration. Journalists reached out. He politely declined interviews. "Why don't you want to speak?" Edwin asked him one evening. David replied, "I didn't do it for applause. I did it for us." Edwin nodded, proud beyond words. Back in the village, things had changed dramatically. The once simple compound was now bustling with activity. Edwin hired local carpenters to rebuild the roof, repaint the walls, and expand the backyard for a modern vegetable garden. He brought in water tanks and installed solar panels to provide constant electricity. Villagers looked on in amazement. Mama Ebu said, "This man don't turn our village into paradise." Children ran up to David shouting, "Uncle! Uncle! Tell us how you did it." Some of the older boys even started helping at the farm voluntarily, hoping to learn or be blessed with a similar story. But not everyone watched with joy. Linda sat alone in her temporary rented room in the nearby town, rereading the online article for the 10th time. Her makeup smeared, her eyes swollen from crying. Her lover, Chief Boma, had immediately cut her off once the news broke. "You deceived me," he yelled at her. "You said your husband was finished. He was. At least I thought, she tried to explain. He waved her off. Now you want to run back to him, ABI. You women are all the same. She left his compound that night with nothing but her handbag and disgrace. Sandra fared no better. Her social media accounts, once filled with filtered selfies and flashy clothes, became battlegrounds. Gold digger. Now you want to go back to your father's money. David is the true MVP. You. Just noise. She tried to clap back online but gave up when the comments became too much. She deactivated her Instagram and sat in a friend's apartment, too ashamed to return home. Eventually, both Linda and Sandra came back to the village, desperate, broken, and hoping for forgiveness. They stood at the gate early one morning, Linda in a faded wrapper, Sandra in jeans that no longer fit her pride. Edwin was pruning tomato stems near the fence when he saw them. Linda called out, "Edwin, please. We came to apologize." Edwin stood still for a long moment. Then he walked to the gate and looked at them through the bars. "I forgave you the day you left," he said. Sandra stepped forward. "Then why won't you let us in?" "Because forgiveness is a gift I gave from my heart," Edwin replied. "But trust, that must be earned. And the space in this home is for people who stood in the storm, not those who waited for the sun." Tears fell down Linda's cheeks. "I was weak. I was scared." David walked up beside his father. "We're not enemies," he told them. "But we've changed. This house has changed. It now has rules, loyalty, respect, truth." They stood there, speechless. Edwin added, "You may stay in the village if you wish. We won't hinder you. But you will not live in this house again. It is now the beginning of a new legacy." Linda slowly lowered her head. Sandra turned away, humiliated. They left the compound, silent. Later that evening, the village elders visited Edwin. "Chief Edwin, you have taught us something great," said Elder Onwechekwa. "That character is greater than riches." Another added, "Your son, he is a blessing not just to you, but to this entire community. We want to honor him." That weekend, the village held a small celebration. Music, dance, and native food. The youth performed a skit about a father who tested his family's loyalty, clearly inspired by Edwin's story. David stood before the people, asked to give a speech. He took a deep breath. "My father taught me that real wealth isn't found in what you keep. It's found in who stays. I stayed because I believed in him, and now, I believe in myself." The crowd clapped. Edwin wiped a tear from his eye. That night, back in the comfort of their quiet compound, Edwin poured 2 glasses of palm wine and handed one to David. "To the truth," he said. David lifted his glass. "And to the pain that revealed it." They clinked their cups, and under the gentle glow of the moon, father and son toasted not to money, but to character, to endurance, and to the deep, unshakable love that only the fire of suffering could reveal. The legacy. 3 months had passed since the revelation shook the entire community, and the country beyond. Edwin Okoro's name, once known only in business circles, had become a symbol of wisdom and purpose. But he remained unchanged. No flashy return to high life. No interviews. No bragging. Instead, Edwin quietly rebuilt his estate, with new priorities. He returned to the city only to settle his businesses and appoint managers. Then he moved back to Umokoro permanently. "Why stay here?" one of his former board members asked during a visit. "You've outgrown this village." Edwin replied with a gentle smile, "This is where I became who I truly am." The compound was now transformed. There was a modern bungalow at the center, painted cream with maroon edges. A borehole supplied clean water. Solar lights lit the entire yard at night. There were now chairs under the mango tree where visitors could sit and share ideas. But Edwin hadn't just rebuilt his house, he rebuilt his purpose. He created a foundation, the David Okoro Initiative for Loyalty and Youth Empowerment. Through this foundation, scholarships were given to local students. Widows received food packages. Farming tools were distributed. and youth were taught how to make a living with their hands. David was now the director. Though he had resumed his university studies part-time, he spent most of his energy running the foundation. Under his leadership, children began dreaming bigger. He organized seminars on honesty, loyalty, and business skills. Teachers often invited him to schools to share his story. "You mean you lived in this same village and farmed?" one boy asked him at a school event. "Yes," David replied. "And I'd do it again. Because hard times don't destroy people, they reveal them." He was now respected not just as Edwin's son, but as a symbol of strength and integrity. Meanwhile, Linda and Sandra had quietly left the village. Unable to face the judgmental stares or rebuild what they had destroyed, they returned to the city. Edwin didn't chase them. He simply wished them well and continued forward. One evening, Edwin sat under the mango tree, staring at the horizon. The sun was setting in streaks of orange and gold. Birds chirped, the wind rustled through the trees, and the smell of fresh palm oil from a neighbor's cooking filled the air. David joined him with 2 cold bottles of malt. He handed one to his father and sat beside him. "Everything feels so peaceful now," David said. Edwin smiled. "Peace is what comes after the storm, if you survive it." David leaned back and looked up at the sky. "Did you know things would turn out like this?" "No," Edwin replied honestly. "I took a risk. I could have lost everyone. But I needed to know the truth." David sipped his drink. "Do you regret it?" Edwin shook his head slowly. "Not at all. Sometimes we must risk comfort to gain clarity. I found you in that fire. And I found myself." They sat in silence for a while. Then David turned. "I want to build a training center next year. For youth, like a real skills hub. Something that lives beyond the foundation." Edwin nodded slowly. "Then build it. Don't wait. You'll support it." "With everything I have." David smiled. "Thank you, Dad." "No, David," Edwin replied, his voice rich with emotion. "Thank you. You saved this family, not with money, but with heart." Later that month, Edwin was invited to speak at a university conference on ethics and leadership. He stood before hundreds of students, his voice steady and calm. "I pretended to be poor to see who would stay," he said. "And in doing so, I became the richest man I've ever known." The crowd stood and applauded. After the event, a young woman approached David. She was tall, graceful, and soft-spoken. Her name was Neka, a graduate in agriculture and passionate about rural development. "I read your story," she said, smiling. "It reminded me that real strength comes from sacrifice." David smiled. "And it taught me that love isn't proven when everything is good, but when nothing is." They exchanged numbers. Weeks turned into conversations. Conversations turned into companionship. One day, David brought Neka home. Edwin watched them from the window as they sat beneath the mango tree, laughing like old friends. He nodded. "Yes," he whispered. "A new legacy begins." The next year, David and Neka opened the Okoro Center for Rural Youth Development, equipped with computers, training equipment, and a community library. It served over 1,000 young people in its first 6 months. Edwin, now in his early 60s, stepped further back into quiet retirement. He spent his mornings tending flowers, feeding chickens, or writing in a worn brown notebook he called Lessons from Loss. One evening, he wrote a single line. "What you lose in wealth, you may gain in wisdom, if you are willing to see beyond the pain." Years later, when Edwin passed away peacefully in his sleep, the entire village mourned. His funeral brought people from across the country. His legacy was read aloud, not just by a pastor, but by children, farmers, widows, and students whose lives he had touched. David stood at the graveside and placed a small mango leaf on the coffin. "You taught me everything," he said, voice trembling. "Now I teach others." He looked at the crowd and added, "My father once said true wealth isn't measured in naira, it's measured in people." And if that is true, then this man died the richest in the world. And in the heart of Umeokoro village, where love had been tested and loyalty proven, a new story began, of legacy, sacrifice, and the quiet strength that lasts long after gold fades. This is not just a story of wealth. It's a story of family, of pain, of sacrifice, and the power of loyalty that shines brighter than gold. Subscribe for more powerful life stories.